There is a specific window every single night, roughly 90 minutes wide, when your brain either quietly rebuilds itself or quietly loses ground. And almost nobody watching this right now knows that window exists, let alone what to put into it. I am not going to make you wait until the end for the good stuff and then bury it under filler. I am going to tell you right now that food number 3 on this list is not optional. It is not a nice to have. Neurologists are increasingly calling it close to non-negotiable for anyone past 60 who wants to keep their memory sharp. And by the time I explain why, you will understand exactly why I put it there and not at number 1. But I also want to be honest with you about something else. Food number 1 on this list is going to surprise you, maybe even shock a few of you, because it is something you have almost certainly been told to cut back on or avoid entirely. I promise you, once you hear the research behind it, you will never look at your evening routine the same way again. So stay with me through all 5, because skipping ahead will cost you the context that makes this actually useful instead of just another list you forget by tomorrow. Let me say that again a different way, because I think it deserves repeating before we go any further. It is not just what you eat during the day that shapes how your memory holds up as you age. It is what you eat in that narrow window right before sleep, because that is when your brain locks the door, turns off the lights to the outside world, and gets to work on the maintenance job it cannot do while you are awake and distracted by the demands of daily life. Most people spend their entire lives thinking about breakfast, thinking about lunch, thinking about whether dinner was too heavy, and never once think about that final snack or drink before bed as anything more than a habit or a craving. I am going to show you tonight that this overlooked window may matter more for your long-term memory than almost anything else you put in your body all day. I have spent close to 3 decades working with patients on the intersection of nutrition and cognitive aging. And if there is one thing I have learned, it is that the conversation around brain health almost entirely ignores the hours between dinner and sleep. We obsess over breakfast. We obsess over supplements. Nobody talks about the fact that your brain does its heaviest repair work while you are unconscious, and what you feed it in the hours leading up to that repair work determines how well the repair actually goes. Before we get into the list, I want to share one study that genuinely changed how I counsel every patient over 60 who walks into my office worried about their memory. Researchers tracking older adults found that specific evening nutrition, timed correctly before sleep, was associated with measurably better next-day recall and significantly reduced markers of brain inflammation compared to those who ate randomly or skipped the window altogether. We are talking about differences large enough to matter in daily life. The difference between walking into a room and remembering why, and standing there confused for a full minute while your family exchanges a worried glance you were not supposed to see. Now, before we count down the list, I want to ask you something, and I really do read these, so take a second and answer honestly in the comments below. Tell me your age, and tell me whether you have noticed your memory changing in the last few years, even in small ways, misplacing your keys more, blanking on a name mid-sentence, walking into a room and forgetting why you went in there. I ask because your answers genuinely shape what I cover in future videos, and there is a community forming here of people who are done accepting memory decline as some unavoidable tax on aging. If that is you, drop a comment, and while you are there, go ahead and hit subscribe right now, because I release a new video like this every single week, and I do not want you to miss the one still coming. This channel exists for exactly one reason: to hand people over 60 the specific, research-backed tools their doctors never have time to mention in a rushed 10-minute appointment. Subscribing costs you nothing, and it tells me to keep making these. Alright, let's get into it. Counting down from 5 to 1, from beneficial all the way up to the one food I consider close to mandatory for anyone serious about protecting their memory as they age. Number 5 is kiwi fruit, and I want to be upfront that most people's reaction is a raised eyebrow, because kiwi does not have the reputation of a superfood the way blueberries or salmon do. That reputation is badly outdated. Kiwi fruit is one of the only fruits on the planet with a meaningful natural concentration of serotonin already present in the fruit itself. Not just the precursors your body needs to eventually make serotonin, but the actual neurotransmitter in measurable form, alongside a dense supply of vitamin C, folate, and a class of antioxidants called carotenoids. Here is why that matters specifically for your brain at night. Serotonin is the direct chemical precursor to melatonin, the hormone that governs how deeply and how efficiently you sleep. As we age, our natural serotonin and melatonin production both decline, sometimes dramatically, which is part of why so many people over 60 report lighter, more fragmented sleep than they had in their 40s. Fragmented sleep is a serious problem for memory specifically, because your brain consolidates new information, meaning it takes short-term memories and files them into long-term storage, almost exclusively during the deep and REM stages of sleep. If you never reach those stages, or you reach them but keep getting kicked back out, that filing process gets interrupted, and information that should have become a permanent memory instead evaporates by morning. A study out of Taiwan followed adults who ate 2 kiwi fruits 1 hour before bed for 4 weeks and found significant improvements in both total sleep time and sleep onset, the amount of time it takes to actually fall asleep, compared to a group that ate nothing. Faster sleep onset and longer total sleep both translate directly into more time spent in the memory-consolidating stages your brain needs. Here is how to use this practically. Eat 1 to 2 kiwi fruits, skin removed, about an hour before you plan to go to bed. Do not pair it with a large meal, since digesting a heavy dinner competes with the relaxation response you are trying to trigger. If you want to intensify the effect, eat the kiwi alongside a small handful of pumpkin seeds, which is the food we are covering next, because the two work through complementary pathways that amplify each other. One more detail worth knowing: kiwi skin itself, if you can tolerate the texture, contains an additional concentration of fiber and antioxidants. So if you enjoy it, there is no need to peel it, though most of my patients find the fuzzy texture unpleasant enough that peeling is worth the small trade-off in nutrients. Number 4 is pumpkin seeds, and this is one I find people are shocked to learn they have been ignoring their whole lives, because pumpkin seeds are one of the single richest food sources of magnesium available anywhere in the average grocery store. Magnesium is involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the human body, and a huge number of those reactions directly govern how your nervous system communicates and how well you sleep. Here is the aging-specific problem nobody warns you about. Magnesium absorption becomes measurably less efficient as we get older, and certain common medications prescribed to people over 60, including some blood pressure medications and acid reducers, further deplete the magnesium your body is able to hold on to. The result is that a significant percentage of adults over 60 are walking around with a magnesium deficiency they have never been tested for and have no idea exists. Think of magnesium as the brake pedal for an overactive nervous system. Without enough of it, your brain has a harder time downshifting into the calm state required for deep sleep, and it also struggles to regulate a neurotransmitter called GABA, which is your brain's primary calming chemical and which plays a direct role in protecting neurons from the kind of overexcitation that, over years, contributes to cognitive decline. Pumpkin seeds are also unusually rich in zinc, a mineral essential for synaptic signaling, meaning the actual electrical and chemical communication happening between the brain cells responsible for storing your memories. Low zinc levels have been associated in multiple studies with poorer memory performance in older adults, and pumpkin seeds happen to be one of the most concentrated dietary sources of zinc you can eat. On top of the magnesium and zinc, pumpkin seeds contain a meaningful amount of tryptophan, the same amino acid precursor to serotonin that we discussed with kiwi, which means eating them in the evening gives your body raw material for the same melatonin production pathway from a completely different angle. Eat roughly 1 ounce of raw or dry roasted, unsalted pumpkin seeds about 90 minutes before bed. Avoid the heavily salted or oil-roasted versions sold as snack food, since the added sodium works against the calming effect you are after. If you struggle with the texture, pumpkin seeds blend easily into a small bowl of plain yogurt or can be ground into a fine meal and stirred into warm milk. One thing I always tell my patients is not to underestimate how much of a difference a genuine magnesium deficiency correction can make. I have watched people who assumed their restlessness and their foggy recall the next morning were simply the price of getting older discover, within 2 or 3 weeks of consistent evening magnesium intake from food sources like this, that they were falling asleep faster and waking up with noticeably clearer thinking. It is rarely a dramatic overnight transformation, but it is consistent enough across enough patients that I no longer consider it a coincidence. If this is landing for you the way it lands for so many of the people I work with, take a second right now and hit that subscribe button, because we are about to get into the top 3, and this is where the science gets genuinely remarkable. I put out a new video every week built specifically for people over 60 who are done being told memory loss is just something you accept. Subscribing means you will not miss the next one, and it costs you nothing but a tap. Number 3, and I meant what I said at the start, this is the one I consider close to mandatory. Number 3 is wild blueberries, and I want to be specific about the word wild because it matters more than most people realize. At number 3, we have a patient story I think about often. A woman named Eleanor, 68 years old, a retired librarian, came to see me convinced her memory was failing faster than it should. She was forgetting book titles she had recommended a week earlier, a small thing on paper, but devastating for someone whose entire identity had been built around remembering exactly which book belonged in which reader's hands. She started incorporating a specific evening blueberry routine as part of a broader plan, and within roughly 10 weeks she told me, almost laughing in disbelief, that titles were coming back to her unprompted, mid-conversation, the way they used to. I am careful never to promise miracles, because every person's biology is different, but Eleanor's experience lines up closely with what the research on blueberries consistently shows, and the research here is some of the strongest in the entire field of nutritional neuroscience. Wild blueberries contain an extraordinarily dense concentration of compounds called anthocyanins, far higher than cultivated blueberries, and these anthocyanins cross the blood-brain barrier, the brain's tightly guarded security checkpoint that most substances cannot get past. Once inside, they do two critical things. First, they reduce oxidative stress, which is essentially cellular wear and tear caused by unstable molecules called free radicals, damage that accumulates disproportionately in the hippocampus, the seahorse-shaped brain structure responsible for forming new memories. Second, and this is the part that genuinely stopped me in my tracks when I first read it, anthocyanins have been shown to stimulate the growth of new neurons in that same hippocampal region, a process called neurogenesis that scientists once believed stopped entirely in adulthood. We now know it continues throughout life, and it can be actively encouraged by specific compounds in food. A study following adults with an average age in the mid-70s who consumed a wild blueberry supplement daily for several months found meaningfully improved performance on memory recall tasks and measurable increases in activity in brain regions tied to memory function, changes that were visible on brain imaging, not just on paper tests. Timing your blueberries in the evening specifically matters because your glymphatic system, the brain's overnight waste clearance network that flushes out metabolic debris, including amyloid protein linked to Alzheimer's disease, becomes most active during deep sleep, and it functions best when your brain cell membranes are well supplied with the antioxidant protection anthocyanins provide. Eat approximately 3/4 of a cup of wild blueberries, fresh or frozen and thawed, about an hour before bed. Frozen wild blueberries actually retain their anthocyanin content extremely well and are often more affordable and available year-round than fresh. Avoid pairing them with added sugar, syrup, or sweetened yogurt, since a sugar spike at bedtime works directly against the calming, repair-oriented state you are trying to create. For an added synergy effect, eat your blueberries alongside the pumpkin seeds from number 4, since the healthy fats and minerals in the seeds help your body absorb the fat-soluble portion of the anthocyanin compounds more efficiently. I want to underline why this one earns its place so firmly at number 3 rather than further down the list. Unlike some of the other foods we are covering tonight, wild blueberries have been studied specifically in populations over 65, not just in general adult populations, and the results in that older age bracket have consistently been among the strongest in the entire body of nutritional neuroscience research. That is precisely why I consider this one close to mandatory rather than simply beneficial. Number 2 is egg yolks, specifically eaten as a small evening snack, and I know that recommending egg yolks to an audience that has spent decades being told to fear cholesterol is going to raise some eyebrows. So let me explain exactly why this concern is outdated. Egg yolks are the single richest common dietary source of a nutrient called choline, and choline is not a minor player. It is the direct raw material your brain uses to manufacture acetylcholine, the primary neurotransmitter responsible for memory formation, learning, and focus. Think of acetylcholine as the specific chemical messenger your brain reaches for every single time it needs to encode a new memory or retrieve an old one. Without adequate choline supply, that messenger runs short, and the entire memory formation process slows down, regardless of how healthy the rest of your brain otherwise is. Here is the aging-specific issue that almost nobody explains clearly. The majority of adults, and this number climbs significantly after 60, consume nowhere near the recommended daily amount of choline, in part because dietary guidance spent decades steering people away from egg yolks over cholesterol fears that large-scale research has since substantially walked back for most healthy older adults. Meanwhile, low choline status has been specifically associated in research with poorer performance on memory tests and, in some longitudinal studies, with greater long-term risk of cognitive decline. A study examining choline intake in older adults found that those with higher choline consumption performed significantly better on tests of verbal memory compared to those with the lowest intake. Eating your choline source in the evening specifically matters because acetylcholine also plays a central role in triggering and sustaining REM sleep, the sleep stage most closely tied to processing and consolidating emotional and episodic memories, meaning the memories of actual events and experiences in your life, not just facts and figures. 2 whole eggs, prepared soft-boiled or poached to preserve the yolk's nutrient content rather than fried at high heat, make an excellent light evening snack roughly 2 hours before bed. If eggs alone feel too heavy that late, half an avocado alongside 1 soft-boiled egg provides complementary healthy fat that further supports absorption of the fat-soluble nutrients in the yolk. Avoid egg white-only preparations in the evening specifically, since the choline lives almost entirely in the yolk, and skipping it defeats the entire purpose. I know the cholesterol conversation is deeply ingrained after decades of hearing the opposite advice, so I want to be direct about this rather than gloss over it. Major reviews of the research over the last several years have found that for most healthy older adults, dietary cholesterol from whole eggs has a far smaller effect on blood cholesterol and cardiovascular risk than was believed when those original guidelines were written. That does not mean every single person should ignore their doctor's individual guidance, especially if you have a specific condition your physician is actively managing. But for the majority of people watching this video, an egg or two a handful of nights a week is a very different conversation than the one most of us grew up with. And now we arrive at number 1. The food I told you at the very start that you have almost certainly been advised to cut back on, and the one I now consider one of the most important interventions in my entire practice for anyone serious about protecting their memory past 60. That food is full-fat plain kefir, the fermented, tangy, yogurt-like drink most people either associate with health food stores or with a strict low-fat diet they were told to follow decades ago. I know exactly what many of you are thinking right now, because I hear it constantly. You have been told to watch your saturated fat. You have been told fermented dairy is an acquired taste not worth the trouble. You have been handed a dozen reasons over the years to leave the full-fat version on the shelf and reach for something labeled light instead. I am going to ask you to set those concerns aside for just a moment, because the gap between the outdated dietary advice most people over 60 were raised on and what current research actually shows about the gut-brain connection has never been wider than it is on this exact topic. Full-fat kefir is one of the most concentrated everyday sources of live probiotic bacteria available in any grocery store, often containing a wider diversity of beneficial bacterial strains than yogurt. Here is why that matters enormously for your brain specifically. Your gut and your brain are connected by what researchers call the gut-brain axis, a direct communication pathway running largely through the vagus nerve, and the trillions of bacteria living in your gut actually manufacture a significant portion of your body's neurotransmitters, including a substantial share of your serotonin, which, as we discussed earlier, is the direct precursor to melatonin. But the connection goes even deeper than neurotransmitter production. A healthy, diverse gut microbiome has been shown in a growing body of research to influence levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the protein most responsible for growing, maintaining, and repairing the neurons involved in memory, the same protein we would call fertilizer for the brain. An unhealthy or imbalanced gut microbiome, by contrast, has been associated with increased systemic inflammation that reaches the brain and interferes with exactly this kind of neural repair. Here is the aging-specific piece that makes timing genuinely critical. Gut microbiome diversity naturally declines as we age, often significantly by the time someone reaches their 70s, and that decline has been correlated in multiple studies with worse cognitive outcomes. Full-fat kefir, consumed consistently, has been shown in research to meaningfully improve microbiome diversity within a matter of weeks, and the fat content is not incidental. It is essential, since certain probiotic strains and the fat-soluble compounds that support brain cell membrane health are absorbed far more efficiently in the presence of dietary fat, which is exactly why the low-fat version so many people were pushed toward for decades delivers a fraction of the benefit. I had a patient, a retired accountant in his early 70s, who came to me certain his mind was slipping in ways that terrified him, forgetting appointments he had written down himself, losing track of conversations mid-sentence. He began drinking a small glass of full-fat kefir every evening as the anchor of a broader, nightly routine. Several months later, he told me, and I still remember how he put it, that his thinking finally felt like it had come back into focus, like a camera lens that had been slightly blurry for years, and someone had finally turned the dial. I never promised that outcome to every patient, because biology varies from person to person, but his experience mirrors what the research on gut health and cognition consistently points toward. Drink approximately 1 cup of plain, unsweetened, full-fat kefir about 90 minutes before bed. Avoid the flavored, sweetened varieties sold in most grocery aisles, since the added sugar feeds the wrong bacteria entirely and can undermine the exact benefit you are drinking it for. If the tartness is difficult at first, a small amount of the raw honey we have discussed in previous videos or a few of the wild blueberries from number 3 stirred in can make it far more palatable without compromising the effect. And in fact, the fiber and antioxidants in blueberries actively feed the beneficial bacteria kefir provides, creating exactly the kind of compounding effect I love pointing out to my patients. If you have never had kefir before and are hesitant to start with a full cup, there is nothing wrong with starting at a quarter cup for the first few nights and gradually working your way up, since introducing a large amount of new probiotic bacteria too quickly can occasionally cause mild digestive adjustment in people who are not used to fermented foods. Give your gut a week or two to adapt, and most people find the full serving completely comfortable after that. So there you have it, 5 foods, each working through a genuinely different pathway, from serotonin and melatonin production, to magnesium and zinc-driven nervous system calm, to hippocampal neurogenesis, to acetylcholine synthesis, all the way up to the gut-brain axis itself, which more researchers every year are coming to believe may be the most underappreciated frontier in the entire field of cognitive aging. None of this requires a prescription, a supplement subscription, or a single dollar spent on something a company invented to sell you hope in a bottle. It requires walking into a normal grocery store and making a few specific, informed choices about what you eat in the final hour or two before you close your eyes. If this video gave you something you did not know walking in, do me one favor before you go. Hit subscribe, because I put out a new video just like this every single week, built entirely around the specific, research-backed information people over 60 deserve to have, and so rarely get in a rushed appointment with a doctor who has 10 minutes and 12 other patients waiting. Subscribing costs you nothing, and it is the single biggest way you can tell me to keep making the videos that are helping this community protect the minds and the independence they have worked an entire lifetime to build. I will see you in the next one.